As somebody once said, we are definitely having fun now, having a very good time, or whatever you
We're
said.
having a good time. That's right.
Yeah. How you doing, Dusty?
I'm doing great. I'm just hanging out at home here, and I'm pumped to be on the podcast
Yeah,
or on the radio. I don't.
the video, we'll just put this out on the internet and we'll plug your show for June 1st at Royal Oak. Are you down in Nashville?
Yes.
Yeah, so as I record this, I'm going down for the third Kid Rock comedy jam next week where I saw you last year.
Oh yeah, that was awesome. I don't guess I'm on this year's. I don't know why, but last year I had a hot set on there.
Yeah, it was great.
Maybe too hot. They were like, we can't have him back.
So have you run into Kid Rock a bunch of times at Zany's? I know he's a big comedy fan.
Yeah, a few times I've seen him there. But yeah, I mean that night was the first time we'd really ever got to interact in an entertainer type way. I mean, I interacted with him as a fan
Yeah.
because I was living, well, I guess not at the time. I just moved out of the trailer park when his album,
Devil Without a
what is it?
Yeah,
Devil Without a Cause with Ba with Taba on it and Cowboy, where he says, I ain't straight out of Compton, I'm straight out the trailer. And I was like, man, I love that. I love that.
Well, his father, who just passed away, owned a bunch of car dealerships. I'm not sure how small that trailer was.
No, well, you know what? I told him, I said that was uh, the life I was living. And he goes, well, he kind of laughed and he goes, well, that wasn't the life I was living. He's very honest about it.
Yeah, he's a really good guy. So I'm heading down there as we record this next week, and that'll be the third one. I've been to all three of them so far, and it's so much fun. I've never been to the Ryman before, and it's just such a great place. So have you played there a bunch of times, or was that the first time?
A fair amount of times, sometimes I do the Grand Ole Opry a bunch,
Yeah.
and sometimes they'll do the Opry there, like in November, December, they'll come back and do the Opry at the Ryman. So I've done it there a couple of times. Actually, one time with two shows in one night with Rita Wilson, and who's married to Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
And so Tom Hanks was at the Ryman watching the show, and I talked to him. I went up to him and I was just going to tell him that I have a certain joke. And then I walk up to him and I just start talking and he sticks out his hand. He goes, Tom. And I go, yeah, I know who you are. You know what I mean? It's like, I appreciate him like wanting to be like a normal person, but I'm like, you're very famous. So I said, I have a joke where a lot of people say I look like Forrest Gump after he ran for a long time. And then so on the second show, I did the joke just so he could see it, but he was gone. So I don't know if he saw it. And then months later, I'm back at the Opry, and one of the security guys tells me, he says, that night you did the Forrest Gump joke with Tom Hanks there. He was like, he was up in the balcony, and they're like, he loved it. So I'm like, that's awesome. And then I opened for Kathleen Madigan at the Ryman. And then Kid Rock's Comedy Jam.
Okay, I know that you do the Grand Ole Opry. You do that quite a bit, from what I understand. Is that correct?
Yeah, I've done it over 30 times now. Wow. Yeah.
I haven't been there yet, and all the times I've been down in Nashville. Maybe I'll take a run. I think I'm going to go to Zany's on Wednesday to see Chris Porter and my friend Zach from Shinedown.
Okay, yeah, Zany's is great. I'll be there on Tuesday, I believe. Let's see. Yes, I'll be there. No, I'll be there Wednesday, the 17th. So either they're open. They have two rooms open now. So I'll be in I guess the main room, and maybe they're in the lab, or maybe they're after my show.
All right. Well,
I don't know.
I'll see if I can swing by and say hello. So that Tom Hanks story, how many celebrities have you met, and does it kind of blow your mind? I saw on your Twitter and stuff, like, Colin Cowherd started following you and stuff. I mean, is that still like kind of mind blowing that when famous people appreciate what you do?
Well, I think some of them, it's like, Colin Cowherd, I mean, obviously is famous in the sports world, right? But I just don't know if it's that he's famous, or if it's just like, in 2009, I bought this car. I was selling pesticides, and I bought this car and it had satellite radio, and I was driving everywhere to go to different Lowe's and Home Depot stores to sell pesticides. And I used to listen to ESPN radio all the time, and Colin Cowherd was my guy. So for years, I was listening to Colin Cowherd, and I'm like, so just to have this moment where now this guy that I listened to for so long is now following me on Twitter, it does blow my mind a little bit. Jamie Johnson is another one. He's a country singer that I liked for a really long time. And I was listening to Jamie Johnson a lot during that time too. And I saw him at the Opry, and I wanted to go talk to him. So I walk into his dressing room, and he's a pretty intimidating looking guy, big beard, big hair. And I walk in and he goes, "Hey, I know you." And he had just watched me on Netflix. And I'm like, that kind of stuff does blow my mind. I don't get so celebrity oriented. Like my daughter's in here, and I don't try to get too celebrity oriented, but it's people that I'm a fan of. Like I like their work. When I realized that they know who I am. Now, not that Tom Hanks knew who I was, but some of these other guys, when I realized they knew who I am, that does blow my mind. With Tom Hanks, it was just cool to me. I mean, I've been watching Tom Hanks on movies my whole life. And to know that I had a joke kind of relating to Tom Hanks on the night he was there, I was like, I got to do the joke.
Yeah, no doubt. So, I think I tweeted you out or put you on Instagram or whatever. Your Working Man Netflix special was really good. Of course, I'm a big fan. I've seen you perform, like I said, with Kid Rock and stuff and some other things. But that Working Man special was great. And then when I found out I was going to talk to you, I had to kind of like look up and research you a little bit and see your background. So a lot of the stuff you brought up really did actually happen. I'm not saying that comedians are liars, but I'm just saying like you actually use real life stuff that you did in your life, in your show.
Oh yeah, I mean, to me, that's the best way. I mean, I think those make the most authentic stories when you're just talking about stuff that really happened to you, and then I don't necessarily think truth is the funniest comedy, but I think that when you're talking about your own self, you never have to worry about stealing a joke, stealing a joke, or yeah, that's my daughter, and yeah. But because you're just talking about your life, and then it becomes original and authentic that way. And I think that's the best way. I mean, when I was growing up, I grew up in the country, and people were always telling just telling stories about stuff. And I always thought that was fun when an older guy is a good storyteller. I mean, it really is fun.
Well,
I'm sorry, I set my daughter up with TV, and then immediately she wanted something else, and I can't go and change it.
No. She's fine. Don't worry about it. But it's funny because you see a guy, the trucker hat, the beard, the long hair, the glasses, the whole thing, and then you say, "Well, I was a pesticide salesman." You're like, "Come on, man," And then
I know. Well, that's why I say in that joke, I say I used to sell pesticides. I don't know if you can tell that by looking at me. But yeah, I mean, I did that for about 10 years. I was a sales rep. So I was going to Lowe's and Home Depots and trying to get set up displays and stuff like that. The job itself is not that interesting of a job, but I have pitched a couple of times to some TV studios, like an animated series around selling pesticides, because what was going on is we had like several companies all competing with each other. So, you would come in, and I would come in, and I was working for a company called Spectracide, and there would be like a Miracle Grow or a Scott's display built, and I would tear that display down, put all their products in the overhead, and then go throw their display shelf in the trash compactor. And so they couldn't build it back, and that was the whole game. I mean, we were just in there trying to destroy each other. In those days, there was a war going on in the Lowe's and Home Depot that people had no idea about.
That is,
and it was
you're quite the salesman, quite the entrepreneur there.
Oh yeah, I mean, it was great. You had to get creative, and you had to find different places to display things. I liked the job a lot. I was outmanned, and all the companies had more money than my company, or at least they spent more money than mine did. But I was outmanned, but it was a lot of fun. I was a big drinker back then, so I was hungover every day. I was sweating a lot. I was smoking a lot of cigarettes. I mean, that's where half those jokes on Working Man come from my days as a pesticide salesman. Just drinking and uh, and it's not all about that, but it's during that time of my life.
Well, I really enjoyed that Netflix show that you did. That your I don't know, it's a special, I guess. The best one I've ever seen on Netflix, and I don't know, what's your opinion? The latest one with Chappelle, the Dreamer one, I thought was unbelievable.
You know what? I didn't watch it. I love Chappelle, but he put out so many so fast that I just am like, I don't know. It's too much for me. It's too many Chappelle specials. Um, I should watch it. I don't watch as much comedy as I should. I do a podcast. I do the Nate Land podcast,
Mhm.
and they're always making fun of me about how I never watched Nate specials. But I'm just like, I just don't watch a lot of comedy. I do so much comedy. And then, Nate's stuff is appropriate, but so much comedy is not appropriate to watch with kids.
Right.
But even my daughter's almost 3, and even if it's appropriate, she don't care about it. She's not trying to watch stand-up comedy. She watches my videos some, and she always goes, "You're talking to the people, Dad. You're talking to the people."
Hey,
And I
great.
say, "That's right. I am talking to the people."
Yeah. I think like I don't know if I'm like a lot of people or whatever, but I think like I'm kind of like not a student of comedy, but I can kind of appreciate the cleverness, the wordsmith, and the things that go into it. And that's why I think the Chappelle one to me was kind of interesting, the last one.
Well, Chappelle's great. I mean, there's no question. I mean, he's so funny. I should watch it. I don't know. I haven't seen it, but that's why I think I think sometimes if you watch specials, you watch too much comedy, you can be influenced by
Right.
them,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
you're like, oh, that was a good joke. I like that idea, and
Yeah.
then you might think in the same area. So I try to not do that. I mean, I do listen to a lot of old comedy, like there's a Steve Martin album that I used to really like called Let's Get Small. I still like it, but when I started comedy, I was listening to it a bunch. And when I go back and listen to it now, I can see how heavily influenced my comedy was by that. Even though me and Steve Martin are such different kind of comedians, he's so absurd, but I feel like I get a lot of that from him. I feel like We're Having a Good Time is somewhat inspired by Steve Martin because he just throughout his special, one time I remember listening to it, he goes, "We're having some fun now, folks."
That's right.
Just something like that. He doesn't say it all the time, not like I do, but and I listen to it and I think, well, that's fun stuff to me. I like just kind of addressing the audience, addressing what's going on. That's why sometimes if the show's not going that well or not going as well as I think it should go, I will talk about that and people will go, "Oh, you're really beating yourself up there." And I'm like, "No, I'm just making jokes. I'm fine."
Mhm.
But I love it. When I used to do shows and it would be a bad show, and then finally I would get a big laugh from the audience, I would go, "Yeah, these are good jokes, people. Get into it." I don't travel the country doing mediocre jokes out here. Let's get into it. And that's the kind of stuff that's fun to me. I love that.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that Steve Martin because TJ Miller was just in the studio with me here a couple weeks ago. You know TJ?
Yeah, I don't know him, but I do know of him.
Oh, he is. Yeah. So he said that record influenced him so much as well. And I was just a kid, and my parents had that on 8 track. And I listened to it over and over and over again. And some of the jokes I wouldn't even understand for like another 15 or 20 years.
Oh
'Cause
yeah.
it was way above my
Well,
head.
I had no idea that I'd never heard another comic talk about that album. That's very interesting.
Yeah, he said it influenced him a lot. That's one of his records that he points back to. You know who used to always say that too is we're having fun or this is whatever. Is David Letterman used to kind of say that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah. I
And
just think that kind of stuff is fun. I mean, a lot of comics will say, "We're having a good time," or "This is fun," or "We're having fun." So sometimes I get tagged in it all the time. If some other comic says, "We're having a good time," they'll tag me in it like that person's stealing from me. And I'm like, well, it's a pretty common phrase. I just happen to say it so much that now it's associated with me.
Yeah. Speaking of celebrities, I see your pinned tweet was a tweet from Norm Macdonald. Are you a big fan of, were you a big fan of his?
I love Norm Macdonald. I mean, it's like I feel like sadly I know more about him now that he's passed because there's so many like accounts on Instagram with Norm, and I'm finding all these really great jokes. But yeah, I love Norm. Norm was so funny. And I did, I did Last Comic Standing in 2015. It was the very last season. And I made it to what they called the final 100, which is basically the first round on TV.
Mhm.
So I made it through 2 auditions, and he was one of the judges. It was Keenan Ivory Wayans, Roseanne, and Norm. And I got kind of bad notes from both Keenan Ivory Wayans and Roseanne, but Norm gave me some really great notes. So I did this video on my YouTube channel where it's just about a 20-minute video talking about my whole Last Comic Standing experience. And before Norm passed, I just tweeted at him that video. And I guess he watched it because he said, he says, I remember you and I followed you since that time. And he said he remembered those jokes. I forget exactly what the tweet said, but it just meant a lot to me because I was like, wow, this guy that I'm a fan of is actually, whether he's really following me or not, I don't know, but he did watch the video, it seemed.
Yeah.
And I just think that, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're saying you think what?
I just think it's awesome. I mean, I was just like, wow, and comedy's a real kind of small world. I think that if you're good at comedy, you get respect by other comics. I just think that's how it goes. It's like I throughout my whole career, if I would go to another city and do an open mic, this was before anybody would have any idea who I was. I wouldn't even try to make friends with the other comics until I went up and told jokes. Because before that time, it's just like, I'm just some dude, just another dude on the list. But once I go up and get a bunch of laughs off my jokes, then everybody wants to be my friend because they're like, oh, this guy's good at comedy. And I even when I started working clubs and I would be opening for people, I would find so often that after I would go up, then the headliner that I would be opening for would be so much more into like talking and engaging with me and hanging out once they saw me. And because there is a lot of bad comedy out there, and it is hard. And I know people are trying, and it's but it's like there's a lot of bad comedy. So I think if you work the road enough, you get kind of jaded to people doing bad, unoriginal comedy. So when you see somebody that's original and funny, you're like, oh, okay, this guy's cool. This is fun.
Yeah, I asked TJ, and I'll ask you the same thing because I've always wanted to try it, and not because I think I'm funny, but because I think it'd be a huge challenge. But I never feel like I'm prepared, and maybe that's because I'm just doing a million other things at the same time. But what is your advice to somebody that wants to give it a shot?
Well, I always say, just know what you want to say. Like, don't go up there and think I'm just going to riff a little bit, because I've been doing comedy roughly about 16 years now. And even now, TJ Miller would say something different because he's really great at just riffing. But, sometimes I'll be like, you know what, I'm just going to go up there and mess around tonight. And then it won't be working. And I'm like, oh man, I should have prepared. So then I just get into jokes and I can get it together. For me, it's like, you do some jokes, then you do a little riffing, and then you do some jokes, and then you do a little riffing. And that works well for me. But I would say just know what you're going to say, be prepared, and then don't judge yourself too hard. But be honest with yourself. I think those things, like oftentimes people will either judge themselves too hard or they don't judge themselves enough. Like they think, oh, that went great when it didn't go great, or they beat themselves up too hard for not doing well. It's like, just have some fun and be honest with yourself. Say, did this go well? And I would say record it and then force yourself to watch it and that will be one of the most uncomfortable things you ever do in your life, is to watch yourself do comedy.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I had to, I was involved in editing my special, but I'm finally at a place at this point where I've watched so much of my own comedy that I can handle it.
Mm.
But it's hard at first.
Oh,
When I used to, when
yo,
I
go,
used to, when I used to, smoke more weed. I've quit weed now, but when I used to do it a lot, I'd be like, oh, I'm gonna watch some of my video from last night, and then I would get a little high, and I'd always know I was too high when I was like, I can't watch this anymore. I can't do it.
so how many nights did you shoot for your special?
Just one night, I did 2 shows back to back.
Okay, I got you. All right. So now, like you said, you're gonna play Zanies, and then you got your theater tour coming up. So you're not now. How does it work? At least for you, because you have Working Man, and you don't want to go back to the same well. So are you trying out some new stuff at some of the smaller places before you head out on tour?
Well, I got a full new hour already. So I filmed my special in May, and then between editing it, selling it to Netflix, and then Netflix actually releasing it, it was, over 6 months. So I just took that time and I just started working. I just started working on the new material. And that way I could slowly phase out the old stuff and work in the new stuff. And I had about a half hour. I probably had an hour and a half of material I liked. So I only recorded an hour, and then I had a half hour that I could immediately start to build my new hour around. So I have a new hour. So if you come see me, it's completely different. There's no repeats at all.
Hmm.
So now, if you saw me in a club 2 years ago, you may see some of those jokes because those are some that I'm bringing around to the new hour, but they'll be different. Even if you hear the joke, you go, oh, I heard this joke last year or whatever when he was here. It's different now. It's different. It's better. I'm always working on it. I'm always cleaning it up, editing. And it's so even if you like, oh, I've heard this, it's going to be better now.
Okay. So let me ask you a couple more things here for you. Doing a late night show. Do you like them? Is that how nervous you get doing those things?
Well, I don't get too nervous now. At this point, I've done 5, and then if you count Comedy Central when I did, that will be 6. So they don't really make me nervous now. But I mean, the first 2 times, really, I mean, I was a wreck. I mean, especially the first time I did the Tonight Show, I was a nervous wreck. I was like, because it's like this is my whole life of people that I've ever met were about to be able to see me on live TV.
Mhm.
And it's like, if I go out and I do a live comedy show that you see and I'm doing an hour, I could mess up a joke and go, and then make fun of myself for messing up that joke for 5 minutes. But if you're doing the Tonight Show, it's like the
Right.
wording has got to be perfect. You can't mess up jokes. There's no time to recover from anything. You just got to roll with it. And it's like, that's the most nerve wracking part is it's like, I've told the Tonight Show that I'm going to do this 5 minutes of material. I've transcribed it. I've sent it to them. I've said, this is what I'm going to do. And now I got to do it. Even if I go, and it's like the thing about comedy, I could do 5 minutes today and then the next day do that same 5 minutes and the audience may not like it.
Mm.
So it may crush in one place and then not go that well in the next. And I have to, but on the Tonight Show, I'm like, it don't matter if they like it or not. This is the 5 I told them I'm going to do. So I got to do it. And it's like my second Tonight Show, I did a lot of hotel jokes, and those jokes were crushing around the country. And they did okay on the Tonight Show. And it really bummed me out because I was like, this is when I needed them to crush.
Mm.
And then even the third one that I did, it was just after COVID, and the whole audience was wearing masks, so it's like it's muffled laughter. It was actually a hot set,
Yeah.
but yeah, I got applauses, but you can't hear the laughs as much.
I didn't realize that you had to submit your material before going on those shows. Is that kind of commonplace?
I think so. They want to know what you're going to say so that you're not, there's all these kind of like, I don't know the official names of them, but there's all kind of things where you don't want to violate this, you don't want to violate that. Like, if you say some copyrighted, and it may not be a big deal depending on the business, but it's like, if I'm talking about, like, I know one of my fist jokes, I would say, it's like being in a Home Depot garden center. And I just changed it. I just said it like a retail store garden center, but it's like, I don't want to, there is things like that where they're like, well, you can't say that. You can't say that. I had a joke I wanted to do, and it's now in my hour, so I'm glad I didn't do it, but it was about Jeffrey Dahmer, like just kind of about Jeffrey Dahmer. It was a girl saying I had Jeffrey Dahmer glasses.
Oh,
And then I kind of made a joke about it. And the person at the time that was approving things at the Tonight Show did not approve that, said I could not do that on. And then, but the time I went back, I was talking to the booker, and he goes, the sad part about that is we got a new person that approves things. And he said, you could probably do that joke now.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's all up to whoever's making the call at the time.
Did somebody actually come up to you and say that? And do you store that in the back of your head and use it later on if you get a chuckle out of it?
I made a joke. I wrote the basic joke, the bones of that joke that night. The next night I went out. Yeah, a girl came up to me and said, basically, those are Jeffrey Dahmer glasses, and you're not going to get laid with those glasses, And she came up to me out of nowhere. I was not even talking to this girl. But so I've written that joke, and that's in my set. That's probably the oldest joke in my set right now, but it changes all the time. It's so much better than it used to be.
Well, when I think of comedy, Jeffrey Dahmer comes right to the top of the list.
Yes, exactly. Now I say in there, I like to humanize a serial killer for a laugh,
So I see you got your little girl right there, and you're going to be going on this theater tour. Do you like leaving home and heading out to different cities?
Well, I hate it now. I still love doing comedy. Actually, once I'm out on the road, I'm in the city. I'm like, all right, I'm back in it. But I hate leaving. My daughter is, she's almost 3, and I have a son that's about 9 months old.
Oh,
and
wow.
so I do hate leaving them. But I'm not gone that long. Right now, my tour, I'll be gone 2 or 3 nights, and then I come home, and then I go out for 2 or 3 nights. Yeah, it's great. But I mean, I feel like I'll end up writing some kid jokes eventually. But right now, I have a few jokes about children's books that I read to them, because I'm just analyzing everything. I just analyze everything to death as it is. So when I'm reading these children books, I'm like, well, this don't make sense. And Disney is the worst. I mean, every Disney story, it's like somebody's dying. I'm like, I don't know why that needs to be in here.
Yeah, right.
And Pinocchio gets kidnapped twice. I'm like, what is this all about? The story I was reading the other day, Geppetto, his dad, I guess, if you want to call him his dad, Geppetto's like, I wish you were a real boy. And then some witch comes in and makes Pinocchio real. And then the next day, Geppetto sends him to school. He has to walk to school. It's like the next day, it's like, did you even want a kid? And he gets kidnapped on the way to school, and some guy puts him on stage and makes him perform for people. And then Geppetto gets him back. And then he gets kidnapped the next day by a guy that wants to take him to Pleasure Island. I'm like, what are we reading here?
Yeah, I don't remember reading those books to my kids. My kids are older now. As a matter of fact, I'm going to Nashville next week because my son turns 21 on Sunday. So,
oh yeah, that's awesome.
So,
well, Nashville that seems like the place to be for a 21st birthday.
yeah, I took my daughter there a couple of years ago, and she's a big country music fan, and we got to see a bunch of people and stuff, and it was great. But I'll tell you what, Dusty, we'll cut you loose here and give a good plug out for the show. June 1st coming up at the Royal Oak Music Theater, Working Man on Netflix right now. And good luck with everything, especially with the children and the tour and all that.
Well, thank you. And I want to say, I've been to Royal Oak a couple of times. This will be my first time at this theater, but I've done, Mark Ridley's Comedy Castle a couple of times, and I love coming there. Those shows are always so fun. I have a 10-minute breakdown of the song It's 5 O'Clock Somewhere on YouTube, and I filmed that at Mark Ridley's Comedy Castle in Royal Oak.
Watching it the other day, yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I love coming there. So I'm a big Michigan fan. I grew up in Alabama, but my sister married a guy from Michigan. He's from Flushing, Michigan. Went to school at University of Michigan at Flint, and so I've always been like always been a Michigan fan. And if anybody was going to beat the University of Alabama, I'm glad it was Michigan. And I appreciate you guys.
There you go. And have have you been anywhere else in Detroit when you've come through?
Not much. My wife is Canadian, and when she was getting her moving down here, she was getting her visa to come down here. She wasn't allowed to leave the country, so we would meet in Windsor a bunch.
Okay.
And so I would oftentimes we would sit in Windsor and look over at Detroit at night. Detroit's beautiful on the Windsor side. I mean, it's those buildings that are there. I don't know what they are, but it's a beautiful city to just sit across the water and look at. But I've not spent a lot of time in Michigan and are in Detroit, but only because I never been booked there. I mean, really, every city that I have any experience seeing is because I've been booked there. I didn't travel much as a kid or much as an adult after. Hold on just a second here, Bob. After when I was a kid, we would only travel wherever my uncle worked in hotels, and wherever he was working, that's where we would go because he would get us a free hotel.
Yeah.
So I've been to lots of parts of Tennessee. I grew up going to Nashville, Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge. So actually, my sister met her husband, who's from Michigan, at a hotel in Decatur, Alabama, where we were on a vacation.
And you got a lot of Michigan connections. Peace.
Yeah, I mean, I used to wear. I mean, I wish I had the picture, but I got a school pic of myself in like elementary school, and I had spiked hair, and I'm wearing a Michigan sweater.
No kidding. Wow.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Well, we'll see you here in Royal Oak at the Royal Oak Music Theater. Nice place to play it coming up on June 1st. We appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate you.